Welcome to the Strategic Pursuit Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Macias, and today we have a special guest. His name is Brett Maxam. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to dive right in. Brett, I actually heard you on Acquiring Minds podcast, and that's where my reach out came. This was one of the only episodes that somebody acquired something completely remote, and it opened my eyes, opened my ears. I was glued, man. I want to hear a little bit more of that, the ownership and running the business now.
Yeah, it's been quite a wild ride. We closed beginning of the year, and fortunately, it's been going pretty good. My wife and I live south suburbs of Denver, bought the company in Vancouver, Washington, and we were really expecting that I'd have to be there a lot more than I actually have been. Say certainly the first probably 3 to 6 months, I was out there quite a bit. Um, Probably 3 out of 4 weeks a month out there, and now it's ramped down a little bit to probably every other week out there for 2 to 3 days. And now when I'm out there, I'm really focusing more on the business, on trying to add customers, to improve processes, and much less in the business, where I was in the first 3 to 6 months. Actually out there measuring what we were pouring, the concrete we were pouring, in the work a lot more. So it's gone really well. We've been able to do some process improvements, really train up a few of the guys, leverage the team more for stuff that the sellers were originally doing. So it's going really well.
I'm happy to hear that. As far as the processes that you guys implemented and having the existing employees move up the ladder, you're still in the process, but looking a bit back, what would you have implemented first? Taking advantage of the employees or really, having that plan as far as implementation with systems?
Yeah, I mean, I'd still say we're very early on with systems. I don't know if I would have done too much differently. It was really important for me to get involved in the business, understand what's working well, make notes on maybe some improvements, but we didn't change much, if anything, for the first, I'd say, you know, probably 5 months of the business. The changes we did start to implement were fairly minor at first. It was, well, I guess back end stuff that no one really saw. So all the accounting, everything used to be done in paper. We would get purchase orders issued, they'd get printed out, they'd be in folders, they'd all get manually entered into QuickBooks. With my accounting background, I felt very comfortable with that work, but ultimately found that, I was spending, my Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays catching up on billing and invoicing and doing it late at night and making mistakes. And it wasn't the best use of my time, but it was easy for me to hold on to because I knew how to do that work. I wasn't very good at it, but about 3, 4 months ago, I hired a virtual assistant from the Philippines with an accounting background, and she's been awesome. She's been able to take on all of that. We pretty much using a G Suite to manage tracking of work being done, communications, all of that, and that's just going great. So with that and WhatsApp, she's been able to really run with all the accounting, get better processes in place so that we're up to date, we're getting invoices out timely, and that's been huge. So that probably eliminated 20, 25 hours a week of what I was doing. And that was something that the seller, it was a husband and wife, his wife was doing all that previously. So she's been able to take on all that, which has been great. Really freed my time up quite a bit. So that now what I'm focusing on, I'm still doing, the other pieces, the seller was measuring everything that we pour. Certain things we have to measure and submit for invoicing. And I just trained my setup crew on how I needed them to measure things, document it, take pictures of it. Everything we set up, we get multiple pictures of measurements. It's sent to a WhatsApp channel, and my accountant takes that, documents it, saves it in a folder, and turns it into an invoice. So that's probably another, five to, depending on the week, 5 to 25 hours a week of work that I was doing when I was out there driving around all the sites and, out there taking phone calls, meanwhile trying to keep track of measurements and losing papers I was writing them down on. And so that's been huge. So just, and I mean, it wasn't a big ask to have the guys do that. It was just, this is what I need. This is how I need to do it. And the couple of guys that are doing it for me, you know, with what you can do on a phone now, they can take a picture, they can type in all the measurements, and it's so much better documentation than we ever had before.
And how about the employees? Because you're the new leader now, right? You've bought this business and construction industry. It's a different environment for somebody that's new into it. I don't know if you've worked in construction before, but different field, right? As far as like that remote leadership goes, how did you get to the point that you're at now? Was it presenting yourself a lot at the beginning, having them know, where you stand? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so it was just trying to be present. It was that first day meeting where we had everybody come in and, explain to them what we were doing. With having the seller financing, I still have that seller very tied in and have an investment in making the business work, making this transaction work. Not necessarily monetary investment, but I do have a pretty large debt with him, so it's in his best interest to support it working. And so, just having his support with those meetings, with the first month, we were spending every day together, driving around, checking on the guys, checking in on our customers, and just really focusing on that transition. It went pretty smoothly where, have guys reaching out as they need something, but just trying to be presence, show up out there a fair amount. It's going pretty well. We have been pretty successful. We had, I think, one guy who left within the first 2 weeks of me taking over, and really he was our newest guy and really wasn't a good fit for the work that he was doing. So wasn't a huge loss there. And
Mhm.
then um, I think believe we've retained everybody who was there when I started, and then added a few guys as well. So that's gone really well.
That's great. Now, the seller, is he still working in the business?
He is not. He is, um, I'd say, more in a unofficial advisory role.
Okay.
So as something comes up, as we're coming up on getting price increases, or concrete company just let us know what the price increases would be for 2026. Some of our other key vendors are letting us know what's going on there. So, talking with him, how have you approached customers in the past with these price increases? Talking to him about that. Every once in a while, a challenge come up, and I'll text him or call him, and he's been a great resource as needed. But we're probably, and have been for months now, where maybe we're talking to each other, 20 minutes to an hour every few weeks. But it's been a pretty quick ramp down, and that was intentional. You want that access and availability, but you also want to make sure that you really jump in and take control of things, and make that transition happen as smoothly as possible, but ideally as quick as possible too.
No, absolutely. I can't agree more. Mm. And as far as, I mean, the relationships that he had with previous customers, did you have any concerns with that? That relationship may have been very much so tied to the previous owner? Did you have concerns with that at the beginning?
Oh, absolutely. Because we do have concentrations. I mean, that was one of the reasons why we went the seller financing route, was that with our high concentrations, challenges that might be had with getting traditional SBA financing. So it was really important to us to make sure that we did understand those relationships. And fortunately, what we found early on was that the seller had been fairly hands off for a number of years, relying more on his foreman, now my foreman, who's just awesome, and um, was much more of a hands off approach. We do a fair amount of texting with our home builders, but you know, if anything, I think my relationships are probably stronger now than his have been for a few years, just because I make it a point to get to know my builders, much more with the day-to-day guys that are boots on the ground, site superintendents, but trying to also build those relationships with the upper levels as well. But it was a concern. It was one we could get over fairly quickly. It certainly helped that our largest home builder had a um, annual vendor meeting. I think my first week starting off, so we were able to go out there. I was able to meet the CEO, the directors, and different heads of the company that first week. So really introduce myself and get that ball running with that, and
Mm.
that helped immensely.
Let's talk a little bit about the financing. It's
Sure.
a little bit different. I'm in Canada. I know financing terms here, but you guys also have, your 401k. We have RRSP, which essentially is the same thing. But talk a little bit about how that came together because it's interesting. I remember that you had mentioned a 70% seller note. Let's break that down a little bit.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd been looking at businesses for about a year, and for my previous career, I've been CFO of a few different private equity backed businesses in the Denver area. And so had known a number of bankers, and so felt pretty well prepared looking at other deals of what could be done and what couldn't be done. Looking at this deal, to me, it was pretty apparent that this would be a challenge to do with traditional SBA financing. And so, having looked at enough deals and danced around topics on previous deals, I was pretty direct and upfront with the broker that, hey, really like the company, really like what they're doing. I have concerns with being able to get this done with traditional financing. Would the seller be open to a pretty large seller carry if we could come to the table with a meaningful cash down payment? And he thought they would. And we explored that further and basically went back and forth a little bit on what that actual down payment would be. I came up a little bit higher than I was maybe wanting to, but we were able to make that work. And yeah, ultimately get to 70% seller financing, which was, fantastic for us. Saved us a good amount of money and fees and transaction fees, closing costs, all of that. Not to mention time to actually get the deal done. And so we really viewed it as a positive. And with that, we're able to move pretty quickly with the sellers.
Mhm.
And I think it was just really good rapport off the bat. Came to the table with very, I'd say, friendly terms on the purchase agreement. We were trying to get to a win-win. We were trying to, make sure that, you know, the terms were fair so that when their attorney reviewed it, it was very minimal red lines, and it just everything went very well. We built really strong rapport, and we were able to maintain that rapport and goodwill through the transaction with the seller.
You mentioned you have that private equity background, corporate background, but you already knew off the bat that this business wasn't going to be, it wasn't going to go through SBA quite. Give me some reasons why you noticed that off the bat.
Yeah, there were some ad backs that we felt were legitimate that I could see being challenged by SBA. Additionally, it's mainly the customer concentration. With the type of work that we do at the size we are, we can only realistically work with so many home builders. And both a blessing and a curse is that when you do really good work, you end up getting awarded additional neighborhoods with the home builder that just compounds that concentration. So with our business, we acknowledged it and we realized there was that concentration very early on. Knew there would be some challenges with SBA around that. Didn't actually go to a lender with it just because we addressed it head on and were able to get get that seller note that we knew would be very good for us economically. And with that, really went in with full ask on what they were looking for the business. And that all worked out well. I mean, part of that risk mitigation on why we were comfortable with that concentration was that what I love about this business is we have a very robust backlog. So we will get awarded a neighborhood that will be in for, typically 1 to could be up to 5 years. And in that neighborhood, if you're ever looking at new homes, you'll typically see there will be phase one, and then phase two will be yet to be developed land. And phase one, they'll say, okay, these are lots, 1 through 75. These are coming up. If you want buyers, if you're interested, we've got these 3 houses built. We've got these in construction, and we've got another 7 lots. You know, if you like any of these, great. And we'll have all those lots in our backlog, plus maybe the next 5 that aren't yet, fully plotted yet. So right now I can look and I've got a pretty good idea of what we're going to be doing over the next 3 months. And so really like that. That gave me a lot of confidence in the business. And the fact that you're in those sites, certainly subject to interest rates and housing demand and all that. But overall, really liked the business. So we were able to get over that challenge.
The good thing about that too is, I mean, a lot of these developers, they have close ties with other developers. It's its own community. And there's something amazing about that too, because I mean, referrals are referrals, and they don't come in, small little chunks like you mentioned. They're big and they're done in phases. So one
Yep.
referral is enough to keep you guys busy for, I assume, like you said, 1 to 3 years.
And we've been able to added an additional home builder, have gotten pre-vetted and approved for a couple um, preferred vendors for other home builders, and then added, what was it, 3 communities with existing home builders. So we've been able to keep pace going pretty good, have added to the team. And but yeah, it's more chunky. It's not, a win can be fairly significant
Yeah.
as you start to add in another neighborhood and builder and what they're looking to do.
No, that's great. That kind of brings me to my next question too. 13-week forecast. I've heard you talk about this. Let's explain that a little bit and why it's so important.
Oh yeah. So this is something I have been, back in my public accounting advisory days, I would work with clients and help set this up for them. And then in my CFO days, this was a must-have tool. And it's very simple. I mean, what it is an Excel spreadsheet, and you're forecasting out 13 weeks, which happens to be a quarter, roughly 3 months. And what you're doing is basically starting with the cash you have in the bank. And for week one or week zero that you're in right now, you would say, okay, this is what I expect to collect. These are my outflows. This is my ending cash. And then week two starts with that ending cash, and you do the same thing. And you can make it as simple or as complex as you want. Typically, what I do is I will use my AR and my AP to forecast out the next 4 to 5 weeks. And then just based on, what I think our production will be, look at my backlog, all of that, forecast out for that 13 weeks. And what it helps to do is identify any cash flow gaps. So, if you're seeing something out there that's 10 weeks out that maybe you're going to be running out of cash, you can make adjustments early and make changes. I've been very lucky that, we'll use kind of modified methods described in the book Profit First,
Hmm.
where we get paid twice a month. We are basically taking cash out of our operating account and putting it into a profit account, putting it into a tax account, and federal taxes and sales taxes, and then into a payroll account. And so my 13-week cash flow is purely off of my operating account. And separate from, you got to pay payroll, you got to pay the government, you got to pay federal and state, and I want to pay myself. So
Hmm.
I'll use that, I'll forecast that, and leave a cushion in my profit account. So the ultimate goal is to first buy out my 401k ROBs and then start taking distributions from the company. But
Hmm.
all that being said, and I'm probably getting too far in the weeds, I use that 13-week cash flow to
Sorry, and I'm
make
also gonna stop you.
yeah,
401 Roth is equivalent to the RRSP for anybody that doesn't know. Uh,
sure.
yes, go ahead.
So, and I've shared that model out to people who reached out after the Acquiring Minds podcast, and had it in there where 10 weeks I was showing uh probably would have some cash flow challenges, at least in my operating account, and I could transfer money back over for my profit. Um, but it was also with me being fairly conservative with my uh, expectation for collections and whatnot. I try to keep it always fairly conservative. I'd rather show that there might be an issue than be overly optimistic and get surprised by it.
Those are great tips. Yeah, for anyone. It is a project-based business, and there's so much concern when people get into those types of businesses with having that constant workflow, right? Building that
Oh yeah,
backlog and always having it consistent. It's sometimes unpredictable. So I think that's definitely key for people in those businesses or any business for that matter. Can't wait to
absolutely.
hear that. But I do want to ask you one more question before we end this. Is there any lessons that you'd like to share? This being your first deal that maybe, you're like, shit, I should have caught that.
Um, I mean, we were pretty prepared for this. It's helped having my background and going through transactions and deals and knowing, seeing firsthand what can go poorly. We felt pretty prepared for it. If anything, I think being my wife and I, were overly pessimistic about what could go wrong, that realistically I could be required to be in Washington full time for, an indeterminate amount of time. Um, you know, that, that J curve can happen. Um, so I think we got lucky too. I haven't seen a lot of significant challenges with that yet. Granted, we're not even a full year in. Um, but I think it does help to be very prepared. Make sure, that 13-week cash flow forecast we just talked about, do that in diligence. Forecast out what that looks like. Put in some upsides, put in some downsides, some challenges in that. And, part of what I did was do that to figure out how much cash I need to bring to the business. Um, to make sure I had significant working capital, because with the construction industry, you know, best case we're getting paid in 30 days. Worst case it can stretch out a lot longer than that. So making sure that we didn't have any oh shit moments of oh we can't make payroll. I mean that just didn't happen, but we planned for it and made sure we had sufficient um, working capital in the business as well as contingency plans in case additional capital was needed.
Being a little bit paranoid, at the beginning,
Oh yeah,
it does help, right? It
yeah,
does help. You think sometimes you expect the worst, hope for the best, and hopefully you always get above that. So,
absolutely.
hey, Brett, I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Good
You have a
talking
good
with you.
one.
All right, take care.